My name is Melissa, and I'm 28 years old. I always thought I had a close-knit family until my brother Trevor became wealthy. While I struggled to make ends meet as a teacher, he lives in luxury. Last Sunday, I stopped by my parents' house unannounced and overheard something that shattered my world. The hushed conversation between my parents and Trevor revealed a betrayal so deep that I still can't believe it. Before I continue this story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments, hit that like button, and subscribe to join my healing journey. Growing up in our middle-class suburban neighborhood in Portland, Trevor and I shared a typical American childhood. Our house wasn't fancy, but it was comfortable with its 4 bedrooms, fenced backyard, and the maple tree where Dad built us a treehouse. Trevor, for years older than me, was my built-in best friend despite our age difference. We shared a bedroom until I turned 10, when Mom finally converted the home office into my own space. Those early years created a bond one thought would last forever. Our parents, Eleanor and Richard, worked incredibly hard. Dad managed a local bank branch, putting in long hours especially at month-end. Mom taught piano lessons from our living room to neighborhood kids after her part-time administrative job. They weren't wealthy, but they made sure we never went without necessities. Their biggest emphasis was always education. Education is the one thing nobody can take from you, Dad would remind us constantly at dinner. From early on, Trevor showed academic brilliance. He brought home perfect report cards, won the spelling bee 3 years running, and was always selected for gifted programs. I still remember the glow of pride on Mom's face when his science project won first place at the state fair. Dad would boast about Trevor's accomplishments to anyone who would listen at neighborhood barbecues. I was different. While I maintained decent grades, my talents lay elsewhere. I could draw portraits that captured personalities, write stories that made my English teachers cry, and connect with people in ways Trevor couldn't. I was the one neighbors called when they needed someone to talk to their troubled teen or help with community theater productions. But somehow, these skills never earned the same approving nods from my parents. "Melissa, why can't you focus more on math like your brother?" Mom would ask when I brought home B's instead of A's. "Those art classes are fine for fun, but they won't get you into a good college," Dad would comment when I showed excitement about my electives. I tried harder in academic subjects, joining debate club and taking AP classes, hoping to see that same parental pride directed my way. When Trevor graduated high school as valedictorian, our living room wall became a shrine to his achievement. His acceptance to Cornell University with a partial scholarship was celebrated with a party that included extended family flying in from 3 states. "That's my boy," Dad said during his emotional toast, heading to the Ivy League. 2 years later, my acceptance to Oregon State to study education received a family dinner at Olive Garden. "It's practical," Mom said, in what I suppose was meant as a compliment. "Teaching is a stable profession," Dad added. The contrast stung, but I genuinely wanted to become a teacher. Working with children gave me purpose. Trevor graduated with honors in computer science, landing his first job at a tech startup that showed potential. The company developed some innovative payment processing software that major retailers began adopting. Meanwhile, I completed my education degree and secured a position teaching 3rd grade at Pinewood Elementary, just 20 minutes from my parents' home. My first year teaching was a financial nightmare. My starting salary barely covered rent for my tiny apartment, student loan payments, and basic living expenses. I ate ramen noodles more often than I care to admit and picked up weekend tutoring gigs just to afford classroom supplies. Meanwhile, Trevor's company was taking off. Stock options that initially seemed like a quirky bonus instead of higher salaries suddenly became valuable as tech giants began courting the startup. Family gatherings transformed into showcases for Trevor's success. Sunday dinners featured updates about his latest promotion, the expansion of his company, or mentions of important people he'd met. Trevor had lunch with a venture capitalist from San Francisco last week, Mom would announce, while passing potatoes. "They're considering another round of funding." I shared stories of my students' breakthroughs, how Lily finally grasped multiplication or how Jaden overcame his reading anxiety, but these stories never commanded the same attention. Eyes would glaze over, followed by quick subject changes back to Trevor's world. Despite the shifting dynamics, I felt genuine happiness for my brother. Trevor worked hard and deserved his success. He remained down to earth, often asking about my classroom and remembering my students' names. When he began bringing expensive gifts for our parents, a high-end coffee machine one Christmas, a surprise weekend getaway for their anniversary, I felt no resentment, only a twinge of inadequacy when placing my homemade gifts beside his wrapped boxes. "You shouldn't have, Trevor," Mom would exclaim while unwrapping his presents, her eyes shining with appreciation. My hand-knitted scarves and framed classroom photos received polite thanks, but never the same enthusiasm. I told myself it was natural for parents to be impressed by expensive gifts, trying to ignore the growing knot in my stomach each time. The first truly uncomfortable moment came during a Labor Day barbecue 5 years after we'd both graduated. Uncle Frank asked about our career trajectories, and Dad immediately launched into a detailed account of Trevor's rise through his company. "He'll be Chief Technology Officer before he's 35, Dad predicted proudly. When Uncle Frank turned to ask about my teaching, Mom quickly interjected, "Melissa's doing fine, but let me tell you about Trevor's new condo downtown." That night, driving home, I finally admitted to myself that something had fundamentally shifted in our family. Money had created an imbalance that was becoming increasingly difficult to ignore. Over the next 5 years, the financial gap between Trevor and me widened into a chasm. His startup was acquired by a tech giant for millions, making my brother wealthy almost overnight. At 32, Trevor moved into a downtown luxury apartment with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city's skyline. His furniture came from designer showrooms, and his kitchen featured appliances I'd only seen in magazines. The black Tesla parked in his reserved spot cost more than I would make in 4 years of teaching. Meanwhile, I shared a modest 2-bedroom apartment with my college friend Jasmine in a decent but unremarkable neighborhood. My 7-year-old Honda had reliable air conditioning and decent gas mileage, its best features. My furniture was a mix of IKEA, thrift store finds, and hand-me-downs from relatives upgrading their homes. My student loans hung over me like a dark cloud. I owed $70,000 and made payments of $500 monthly, which meant nearly a quarter of my take-home pay went straight to loans. I'd been told my parents had saved for both our educations, but somehow those funds had never materialized for me. When I'd asked about it during my freshman year, Dad vaguely mentioned market downturns and changed the subject. Despite financial struggles, I loved teaching. Watching a child's face light up with understanding made the financial sacrifices worthwhile. My classroom became my haven, decorated with colorful educational posters purchased with my own money and student artwork that meant more to me than any expensive painting. Trevor occasionally offered financial help. "Let me pay off those student loans, Mel," he suggested during one visit to my apartment. "It would be nothing to me, and everything to your monthly budget." His generosity was genuine, but I declined. Perhaps it was foolish pride, but I needed to stand on my own feet. "Thanks, but I'll manage," I told him. "I made these choices, and I'll handle the consequences." What hurt more than my financial situation was watching my parents' lifestyle improve through Trevor's generosity. They began taking luxury cruises to Alaska and the Mediterranean. Dad retired 2 years earlier than planned because Trevor wanted to give back to them for all their sacrifices. Mom got the kitchen renovation she talked about for 20 years. "You should join us in Greece next summer," Mom said during one Sunday call. Trevor's renting a villa for 2 weeks. The invitation was technically open, but we all knew my teaching schedule and bank account made it impossible. I couldn't afford the airfare, let alone take unpaid time off during the school year. These exclusions from family experiences accumulated like small paper cuts to my heart. Trevor's personal life flourished alongside his career. He met Sophia at a charity gala. She was a marketing executive for a cosmetics company, elegant and accomplished. Their Instagram posts showed them at exclusive restaurants, attending gallery openings, and taking spontaneous weekend trips to wine country. They made a stunning couple, both attractive and successful. My parents were immediately enchanted with Sophia. "She's so accomplished," Mom gushed after their first meeting. And from such a good family. Her father is a surgeon, you know. The unspoken comparison to my boyfriend, Ryan, hung in the air. Ryan taught physical education at my school, kind, funny, and as financially stretched as I was. When I'd introduced him to my parents, their reception had been polite but lukewarm. "He seems nice," was all Mom offered afterward. The engagement announcement came during a family dinner at Trevor's apartment. Sophia's 5-carat diamond ring caught the light as she extended her hand to show everyone. "We're thinking about a destination wedding," she announced excitedly. "Maybe Santorini or the Amalfi Coast." Mom immediately jumped in. "We'd love to help with the planning. I've always dreamed of helping plan a beautiful wedding." Her enthusiasm stabbed at me. When I'd mentioned Ryan and I were getting serious, she had simply nodded and changed the subject. A month later, Trevor called with news that made my parents ecstatic. "I just closed on a house," he announced. 5 bedrooms, pool, home theater room. Plenty of space for when we start a family. The $3 million purchase received days of excited discussion and prompted a special celebration dinner. That same week, I'd received a Teacher of the Year nomination at my school. When I mentioned it at the house celebration dinner, Dad said, "That's nice, honey," before immediately turning back to Trevor to discuss property values in his new neighborhood. The contrast in reactions became impossible to ignore. After everyone else had left, I finally found the courage to address the elephant in the room. "Do you realize you've spent the entire evening discussing Trevor's house while completely ignoring my achievement?" I asked my parents as we cleaned up dessert plates. "Oh, Melissa, don't be so sensitive," Mom dismissed with a wave. "A house purchase is a big deal. And Teacher of the Year isn't." My voice cracked slightly. Dad sighed, placing dishes in the sink. "Nobody's saying that, but let's be realistic. Trevor's accomplishing things on a different scale. It's not favoritism, it's just acknowledging reality. The reality that you value his achievements more than mine." The words tumbled out before I could stop them. Mom's expression hardened. "I think you're just jealous of your brother's success. We raised you better than that." I left their house that night with tears streaming down my face, the first major crack in our family facade exposed for all to see. Trevor and Sophia's engagement party was held at the Kingsley, Portland's most exclusive venue. Crystal chandeliers hung from vaulted ceilings, champagne flowed freely, and servers circulated with trays of appetizers I couldn't pronounce. The guest list included tech executives, local celebrities, and politicians. I wore my best dress, a navy blue cocktail number purchased on sale last season, and still felt hopelessly underdressed among designer gowns and custom suits. I lingered near the chocolate fountain, feeling like an imposter in this world of wealth and privilege, when Trevor approached. "There's my favorite sister," he said with the warm smile that hadn't changed since childhood. "I'm your only sister," I reminded him, our old joke still comfortable between us. "Mel, Sophia, and I have been talking. We both want you to be the maid of honor." His sincerity touched me. Despite our diverging lives, he still wanted me in this central role. "Really? Are you sure Sophia doesn't have a sister or best friend she'd prefer?" I asked, surprised by the offer. "She has 3 bridesmaids from her side, but she agrees you should have this spot. You're my best friend, Mel. Always have been." Warmth spread through my chest, temporarily displacing my discomfort. "Then I'd be honored," I said, meaning it completely. Whatever complications existed in our family, Trevor was still my brother, and I loved him. My enthusiasm dimmed considerably 2 weeks later during the first wedding planning meeting. Sophia had reserved a private dining room at Luciana's, where the menu had no prices listed, never a good sign for my budget. My parents arrived in Mom's new Lexus, a birthday gift from Trevor. Sophia's parents, Dr. and Mrs. Peterson, exuded confidence and old money elegance. "We're thinking around 200 guests," Sophia began, opening a leather portfolio with wedding magazine cutouts and color swatches. "The Santorini venue can accommodate that number, and we've tentatively reserved the entire Elysium Resort for 3 nights. I nearly choked on my sparkling water. "The entire resort? We want everyone to stay together," Trevor explained. It creates a better experience. Sophia's mother nodded approvingly. The sunset views from the cliffside ceremony location are unparalleled. Worth every penny. The wedding planner, a sleek woman named Vivian with a British accent, presented a preliminary budget spreadsheet. I glimpsed the bottom line, just over $200,000, before the tablet was passed around. My entire salary for 4 years would be spent on a 3-day celebration. Now for the bridal party details, Sophia continued. I've selected Marchesa for the bridesmaids' dresses. They're blush-colored with handmade embellishments.
She slid a photo toward me.
$3,000 each, but Trevor and I will cover half as our gift to you girls.
$1,500.
That was still my monthly rent.
Plus altération. Plus chousse.
Plus hair and makeup. My heart raced as I calculated costs that would drain my modest savings completely. The bachelor and bachelorette parties will be in Barcelona the weekend before, Sophia's maid of honor announced. 4 days, 3 nights. We've found an amazing villa. International travel. More time off work. More expenses. The room seemed to shrink around me as anxiety tightened my chest. Melissa, you look pale. Are you feeling all right? Mom asked, noticing my discomfort.
Ai fine ilid.
Just a little overwhelmed by all the details. After dessert was served, I found a moment to pull Trevor aside. The wedding sounds amazing, I began carefully, but I need to be honest about my financial situation. These costs are significant for me. The dress alone is nearly 2 months of student loan payments. Trevor's face fell. I didn't think about that. Let me cover your expenses entirely. No, I said firmly. I don't want special treatment or to feel like a charity case in front of Sophia's friends. I just need to understand all the expected costs up front so I can budget and pick up extra tutoring jobs. I should have been more considerate, Trevor said, genuine regret in his voice. Let me talk to Sophia about selecting more affordable options. But when he raised the subject back at the table, Sophia's reaction was immediate. We've already committed to Marchesa, she said, her smile tight. Everyone else is on board. We can't change everything now. It's our special day, and we've dreamed of these specific details. My parents watched the exchange silently. Not once did they suggest scaling back for my benefit or offer to help with my expenses. The message was clear: accommodate the plans or step aside. That night, I broke down in our apartment while Jasmine made tea. I'll need to spend at least $8,000 to participate in this wedding, I calculated aloud. That's every cent of my emergency fund plus maxing out my credit card. Can you talk to your parents? Jasmine suggested. Maybe they could help since they seem so invested in this wedding. They've made it clear this is my problem to solve, I said bitterly. Besides, they're contributing to the rehearsal dinner that probably costs more than my annual salary. Despite my reservations, I committed to finding a way. I picked up tutoring jobs on weekends and evenings. I signed up to teach summer school instead of taking a much-needed break. I canceled my dental cleaning and put off repairing my car's dented fender. Every extra dollar went into my wedding fund envelope. The expenses kept mounting. Sophia's bridal shower required a $500 contribution from bridesmaids. The bachelorette party deposit was due, $1,200 for accommodations alone. I depleted my modest savings account to purchase the non-refundable plane ticket to Greece, trying not to think about how long it had taken to accumulate that cushion of financial security. 6 months into planning, I met with the travel agent handling group bookings for wedding guests. The room block at the resort is $350 per night, minimum 3-night stay, she informed me cheerfully. Plus, there's the welcome dinner, excursion day, and farewell brunch to consider in your budget. Walking to my car afterward, I called Ryan in tears. I can't do this. It's financially ruining me. Maybe it's time to be honest with everyone, he suggested gently. There's no shame in having budget limitations. But there was shame, at least in my family. Money had become the measure of worth, and my inability to keep up only highlighted my perceived inadequacy. Still, Ryan was right. I needed to have an honest conversation with my family before this wedding bankrupted me completely. The following Sunday, I drove to my parents' suburban home to drop off my completed RSVP cards for the wedding welcome dinner and farewell brunch. Mom had texted asking me to return them ASAP since they were already late, though the deadline was still a week away. I figured I could drop them off quickly and avoid a lengthy visit since tensions had been high since our last conversation about wedding expenses. Their house looked immaculate as always, with Mom's carefully tended flower beds in full bloom. I used my key to let myself in when nobody answered the doorbell, assuming they might be in the backyard. "Hello, Mom?"
Dad.
I called out, placing my purse on the entryway table. Faint voices came from my father's study down the hall, the formal room with leather-bound books and his prized golf memorabilia where serious family discussions typically occurred. I walked toward the partially open door, about to announce my presence when I heard my name mentioned. "Melissa's been hinting about the wedding expenses again," my father's distinctive voice said, sounding annoyed. "Trevor, I know you're concerned, but you need to stand firm on this." I froze in the hallway, my hand raised to knock on the door frame. "I just worry it's putting real financial strain on her," Trevor responded, his voice carrying notes of genuine concern. "Teaching doesn't pay much, and I know she's still dealing with student loans. Maybe we could rethink some of the expectations for the bridal party." "Don't worry about your sister," Dad replied dismissively. "This is your wedding. You and Sophia deserve exactly what you want without compromise." "We'll make her pay for everything," Mom added, her tone matter-of-fact. "It's good for her character. Melissa needs to learn financial responsibility." The casual cruelty in her voice made my stomach lurch. These were my parents, the people who were supposed to love us equally and protect us both. "I could easily cover her expenses," Trevor suggested. "It wouldn't affect our budget at all, and it would take pressure off her." "Absolutely not," Dad's voice turned stern. "That would be enabling her poor life choices. She chose a career in teaching knowing the financial limitations. Actions have consequences." "But you helped me so much when I was starting out," Trevor countered. "My first apartment deposit helping with my student loans. That was an investment in your future," Mom explained as if it were obvious. "We knew you'd be successful in your field. It made financial sense." "What about Melissa's college fund?" Trevor asked. "I thought you had money set aside for both of us." My heart pounded so loudly I worried they might hear it from inside the study. "I'd asked about this fund multiple times during college." Dad cleared his throat uncomfortably. "We redirected those funds toward your graduate school applications and your first investment opportunity. It was the sensible choice at the time." "Wait," Trevor sounded genuinely shocked. "So the money you told Melissa went to market downturns actually went to me? Does she know this? What purpose would telling her serve?" Mom asked coldly. "She believes we helped with her education as much as we could. That narrative works better for everyone." "We've set aside $50,000 for your wedding," Dad continued, changing the subject. "We want it to be perfect. The Petersons are contributing significantly, and we need to match their generosity." I stood frozen, tears streaming silently down my face. $50,000 for Trevor's wedding, while I struggled under the weight of student loans they'd promised to help with. The revelation that they deliberately lied about my college fund hit like a physical blow. "I don't feel right about this," Trevor said, but his protest sounded weak, conflicted. "Trust us," Mom said soothingly. "Melissa will manage. She always does. This tough love approach is what she needs to grow up financially." I couldn't bear to hear more. I silently backed away from the door, grabbed my purse, and slipped out of the house, praying they wouldn't hear the front door close. In my car, parked down the street, violent sobs racked my body. Everything I thought I knew about my family had been a carefully constructed lie. The drive home passed in a blur of tears and shock. Twice I had to pull over when the crying made it impossible to see the road. My phone buzzed with a text from Mom. "Did you drop off those RSVPs yet? We're waiting on you." The casual message after what I'd just overheard only intensified my pain. How could she act so normal after what I'd heard? Had they always seen me as the lesser child, unworthy of the same support and love? I somehow made it to Jasmine's apartment, stumbling through the door in such a state that she initially thought someone had died. They lied about everything. I choked out between sobs, collapsing onto our couch. The college fund, the loans, everything. They gave my money to Trevor because they thought he was the better investment. Jasmine held me while I poured out the entire conversation, her own eyes filling with tears of sympathy and anger on my behalf. "That's not what parents are supposed to do," she kept saying. "That's not love, Melissa. That's not love at all." That night, curled in bed with puffy eyes and an aching heart, I made no decisions. The pain was too raw, too all-encompassing. I simply existed in a state of betrayal and grief, mourning the family I thought I had. For a full week, I avoided all contact with my family. I called in sick to work for 2 days, something I'd never done before except when hospitalized with appendicitis 3 years prior. My phone accumulated missed calls and increasingly concerned texts from Trevor, Mom, and Dad. "Are you okay? You weren't at Sunday dinner. Melissa, please call us. We're worried. Sis, is everything all right? No one's heard from you." I responded only to Trevor with a brief message. "Need some space. Not feeling well. We'll call soon." Even that took tremendous effort, my fingers heavy with the weight of betrayal as they moved across the screen. Ryan and Jasmine created a protective bubble around me, fielding questions from mutual friends and bringing over comfort food. "You need to confront them," Ryan finally said on the 6th day of my self-imposed isolation. "This will eat you alive otherwise." He was right. The conversation I'd overheard played on constant loop in my mind, poisoning memories I'd previously cherished. Each recollection of childhood now came with questions. Was that trip to the Science Museum only because Trevor wanted to go? Did they attend my school plays out of genuine interest or obligation? Had anything in our family been real? On the 8th day, I texted all 3 of them. "Family dinner tomorrow night at 7. My treat. Need to discuss something important." I selected a moderately priced restaurant, not so expensive that it would strain my budget further, but nice enough that a public setting might prevent the conversation from devolving into a screaming match. They arrived together, having apparently carpooled from my parents' house. The hostess led us to a corner booth where I'd already been waiting for 20 minutes, nursing a glass of wine and rehearsing what I needed to say. "Melissa, honey, we've been so worried," Mom started, reaching for my hand across the table. I pulled back instinctively. "Are you ill? You look like you've lost weight." "I'm not sick," I said flatly. "At least not physically." Dad frowned. "What's this about then?" Your text sounded ominous. Trevor watched me carefully, his expression concerned but also wary, as if he sensed what might be coming. "Let's order first," I suggested, maintaining an artificial calm. "This conversation will go better with food." Small talk about weather and traffic filled the excruciating minutes until our meals arrived. Mom chatted about wedding details, seemingly oblivious to the tension radiating from me. The florist in Santorini sent the most beautiful sample arrangements, and the welcome bags for guests are coming together nicely. Once the server had delivered our entrees and left, I set down my fork and looked directly at my parents. "Last Sunday, I came by the house to drop off those RSVP cards." "We never got them," Mom interrupted, frowning. "That's because I overheard a conversation that made me leave without delivering them." My voice remained steady despite my racing heart. "I heard everything you said in Dad's study. Everything about making me pay for the wedding expenses. Everything about redirecting my college fund to Trevor. Everything about considering him the better investment." The color drained from my mother's face. My father froze with his fork midway to his mouth. Trevor closed his eyes briefly, a pained expression crossing his features. "You misunderstood," Dad finally said, setting down his utensils. "Context is important in these discussions." "What context justifies lying to me about my college fund?" I challenged, keeping my voice low but intense. "What context makes it okay to set aside $50,000 for Trevor's wedding while watching me drain my savings and work extra jobs to afford being in it?" We never promised to pay for your expenses, Mom said defensively. Adults handle their own financial obligations. I'm not talking about the wedding expenses, I clarified, feeling heat rise in my face. I'm talking about the systematic favoritism that's defined our family for years. I heard Dad explicitly say you redirected my college fund to Trevor's graduate school and investments. Financial decisions aren't about favoritism, Dad insisted, his businessman persona taking over. They're about return on investment. Trevor's career path simply offered better financial outcomes. The clinical assessment of our worth as children hit like a slap. So, I was the bad investment? The child not worth supporting? That's not what we meant, Mom backpedaled, looking around nervously as if worried about being overheard. We love you both equally. We just had limited resources and had to make practical choices. Limited resources? I repeated incredulously. You just committed $50,000 to a wedding. That would have covered most of my student loans, the ones you promised to help with but never did. Trevor finally spoke, his voice quiet but firm. They did promise to help you, Melissa. I remember those conversations, too. Mom shot him a warning look that didn't go unnoticed. You told me the market crashed and my college fund was gone. I continued, addressing my parents directly. That was a lie. You made a conscious choice to invest in Trevor instead of me because you decided his future mattered more. We were trying to teach you independence, Dad explained, his tone suggesting I should be grateful. Trevor's situation was different.
How?
I demanded. Because he chose a lucrative field? Because he fit your definition of success? Partly yes, Dad admitted, his honesty finally breaking through. We saw potential for significant achievement in Trevor's path. Teaching is noble, but it doesn't offer the same opportunities. Opportunities for what? Making you proud? Giving you bragging rights at country club dinners? My voice cracked with emotion. Do you have any idea how it feels to know your parents redirected your education money to your brother because they thought you weren't worth the investment? That's a very dramatic interpretation, Mom said dismissively. You're being overly emotional about practical decisions made years ago. I've sacrificed everything to be part of this wedding, I continued, ignoring her dismissal. I've picked up extra jobs, canceled vacations, put off car repairs. I've spent my emergency fund on plane tickets to Greece. And all while you're secretly setting aside $50,000 for the event itself, not once considering that your daughter is drowning financially. If you can't afford the wedding, you should have said something sooner, Dad said coldly. Nobody forced you to participate. His callousness broke something inside me. Do you even hear yourself? Do you understand what you're saying to your daughter right now? That I should exclude myself from my only brother's wedding because I can't afford the luxury version you're all planning. Trevor reached across the table toward me. Mel, I had no idea it was this bad. I swear I'll cover all your expenses from now on. This isn't about money anymore, Trevor, I said, tears finally spilling over. It's about learning that our parents have systematically favored you my entire life. That they've lied to me repeatedly. That they see me as less valuable because I chose to teach children instead of chase wealth. That's not true, Mom protested weakly. We're proud of you too. When? I challenged. When have you ever shown the same pride in my achievements as Trevor's? When have you ever celebrated my successes the way you celebrate his? Their silence was damning. I can't do this anymore, I finally said, dropping my napkin on my barely touched meal. I can't pretend we're a happy, normal family when I now know the truth. I won't be attending the wedding. I can't stand up there pretending to celebrate while knowing what I know now. Melissa, you're being ridiculous, Mom hissed. Think about how this will look to everyone. That's your concern? Appearances? I laughed bitterly. Not the fact that your daughter just told you she's been deeply hurt by your actions? I stood up, legs shaking. I've already paid for dinner. Enjoy the rest of your meal and your perfect wedding. I need some time away from this family to figure out what, if anything, can be salvaged. Trevor half rose. Mel, please don't go like this. We should talk more. Not tonight, I said firmly. I've said what I needed to say. The ball is in your courts now. I walked out of the restaurant with as much dignity as I could muster, ignoring my mother's calls to come back and my father's stern voice, saying I was overreacting. In my car, I blocked their numbers temporarily, needing space from the inevitable barrage of texts and calls that would follow. The confrontation had gone both better and worse than expected. I'd said my piece without completely falling apart, but their responses had only confirmed my worst fears. The family I thought I had existed only in my imagination. The following weeks were some of the most difficult and yet transformative of my life. With their numbers blocked, my family couldn't reach me directly, though Trevor did send an email with the subject line, "Please read when you're ready," that remained unopened in my inbox for days. Jasmine became my rock, listening to my processing night after night as I cycled through anger, grief, and confusion. "I keep trying to understand how parents could do this," I told her during one late-night conversation. "Did they ever love me the same way they loved him?" Ryan provided another crucial perspective. Some parents see their children as extensions of themselves rather than individuals, he suggested one evening as we walked along the riverfront. "Your career choice didn't align with their image of success, so they invested less in you emotionally and financially." His words resonated painfully. My parents had always emphasized achievement over happiness, status over fulfillment. Had I been measuring myself against their flawed value system my entire life? 2 weeks after the restaurant confrontation, I started seeing a therapist named Diana who specialized in family trauma. Our first session left me emotionally drained, but with a glimmer of clarity. "What you're describing sounds like golden child syndrome," Diana explained. "It's common in families where parents create a dynamic of favoritism, often unconsciously. The golden child receives praise, support, and resources, while siblings receive conditional love based on meeting certain expectations."
But why?
I asked, dabbing at tears. Why would parents do that to their own children? "Often it's a reflection of their own insecurities and values," she said gently. "Parents who measure success in terms of status and financial achievement will naturally favor the child who validates those values. It rarely has anything to do with loving one child more than another, though it certainly feels that way to the unfavored child." Over several sessions, Diana helped me identify patterns that had existed since childhood, the different standards applied to Trevor and me, the conditional nature of my parents' approval, the ways I'd internalized their values despite choosing a different path. "The question now," Diana said during our 4th session, "is what boundaries you need to establish moving forward. Healing doesn't require reconciliation on their terms." That same week, I reconnected with my childhood friend Amanda, who had witnessed our family dynamics firsthand for years. Over coffee in her sun-drenched kitchen, I hesitantly shared what I'd discovered. "Honestly, Mel, I'm not surprised," Amanda said, reaching for my hand across her table. "I saw it even when we were kids. Remember your 10th grade art show? Your watercolor won first place, and your parents barely acknowledged it because Trevor had a science competition the same weekend."
You noticed that?
I asked, surprised that others had seen what I'd tried so hard to ignore. "Everyone noticed," she confirmed gently. "Our moms were in the same book club, and I overheard mine telling my dad once that your parents played favorites pretty blatantly."
She felt bad for you.
This external validation was both painful and oddly healing. I wasn't crazy. I hadn't imagined the unequal treatment. Others had seen it too. The most difficult decision I faced was about the wedding. My initial emotional declaration that I wouldn't attend now required rational consideration. Did I want to miss my only brother's wedding? Would that decision bring healing or more pain in the long run? 3 weeks after our confrontation, Trevor showed up unannounced at my apartment. When I opened the door, we stood looking at each other in uncomfortable silence before he asked quietly, "Can I come in?" We sat in my small living room, the space suddenly seeming shabby compared to his luxurious home. "I've been trying to respect your need for space," he began, "but I couldn't let this go on any longer without talking face to face." "I appreciate that," I said stiffly, unsure where this conversation would lead. Trevor ran a hand through his hair, a nervous gesture from childhood. "First, I want you to know I had no idea about the college fund. I always thought they contributed equally to our educations. I never would have accepted that money had I known. I nodded, believing him. Trevor had his flaws, but deliberate cruelty wasn't among them. Second, I'm sorry for my part in all this. I should have noticed the pattern sooner. I should have questioned why they always seem to have money for my ventures, but not for your needs. I was so caught up in my own world that I failed to see what was happening. You weren't responsible for their choices, I said, softening slightly. You are just accepting the support any child would expect from their parents. But I became complicit by accepting the preferential treatment, he countered. And I should have pushed back harder about the wedding expenses. I knew they were substantial, but I let Sophia's vision take precedence over your financial reality. We talked for hours, peeling back layers of our shared childhood and seeing events through new, more honest perspectives. Trevor revealed his own struggles with our parents' expectations, the constant pressure to achieve, the subtle threats of disapproval if he considered career paths that paid less. In some ways, you got the better deal, he admitted. You broke free from their value system earlier. You chose what actually made you happy instead of what would make them proud. I'm still trying to figure out if my career choices were truly mine or just the path of least resistance. This vulnerability from my successful brother shifted something in me. Perhaps we had both been damaged by our parents' conditional love, just in different ways. About the wedding, Trevor said tentatively. I completely understand if you still don't want to participate. But selfishly, I hope you'll reconsider. You're my sister, Mel. My only sibling. The thought of getting married without you there feels wrong. I don't know if I can face them, I admitted. Every time I think about seeing Mom and Dad now, I feel physically ill. What if I talk to them, he suggested. Make it clear that they need to respect your boundaries and give you space at the wedding? They'll be so busy with the Petersons and their friends that it might be easier than you think to maintain distance. And Sophia's expectations for bridesmaids? The dress, the parties, all of it. I've already told Sophia I'm covering all your expenses myself, Trevor said firmly. Not as a loan or charity, but as a gift between siblings. She understands this is non-negotiable. I considered his words carefully. I need some conditions if I'm going to be there. First, I'll accept your help with expenses, but only because it would financially break me otherwise. Second, I need minimal contact with Mom and Dad during the events. Third, I want to bring Ryan for support. Done, and absolutely done. Trevor agreed immediately. Ryan's already on the guest list, and I'll make sure you're seated away from our parents at all events. We didn't solve everything that day, but we began rebuilding our relationship on more honest ground. I agreed to attend the wedding, not for my parents, but for the brother, who was making genuine efforts to understand and repair the damage. Before Trevor left, I handed him a letter I'd written to our parents. I'm not ready to speak with them directly, I explained, but they need to understand my position and what I need from them going forward. The letter outlined my feelings without accusation, focusing instead on the specific behaviors that had hurt me and the boundaries I needed to establish. I explained that reconciliation would require acknowledgement of the favoritism, an apology for the lies, and a commitment to more equitable treatment going forward. I'll make sure they read every word, Trevor promised, tucking the envelope carefully into his jacket. As expected, my parents responded defensively at first. Mom called the letter dramatic and one-sided, according to Trevor. Dad maintained that financial decisions weren't about favoritism, but practicality. But as the wedding approached and it became clear I was serious about maintaining distance, small shifts began to occur. Mom sent a brief text. We miss you at Sunday dinners. We should talk when you're ready. Dad left a voicemail. Perhaps there are things we could have handled differently. Let's discuss after the wedding. These weren't the heartfelt apologies I deserved, but they were tiny acknowledgments that something had broken and needed repair. It was a start, however small. 6 months after discovering the painful truth about my family, I found myself on a plane to Santorini with Ryan beside me, holding my hand during takeoff. Trevor had kept his word, covering all expenses related to the wedding, including our flights and accommodations. The bridesmaid dress hung in a garment bag overhead, altered to fit perfectly. Despite my initial reluctance, I had committed to being present for my brother's important day. Greece was as breathtaking as everyone had claimed: whitewashed buildings against the deep blue sea, sunsets that painted the sky in impossible colors, and food that made every meal a celebration. Under different circumstances, it would have been the trip of a lifetime. The wedding party arrived 3 days before other guests. Sophia's 3 bridesmaids, college friends who worked in finance, law, and pharmaceutical sales, were polite but distant, clearly aware of the family tension. To my surprise, they made efforts to include me in preparations, perhaps coached by Sophia herself, who had been unexpectedly considerate since Trevor's intervention. My parents maintained careful distance during group activities, respecting the boundaries I'd established through Trevor. Our interactions were civil but minimal, a stark contrast to the forced closeness that had characterized family events in the past. The morning of the wedding, Trevor knocked on my hotel room door while Ryan was at the pool. "Can we talk before things get crazy?" he asked, looking uncharacteristically nervous in casual shorts and a t-shirt. We walked along the hotel's cliffside path, the Aegean Sea stretching endlessly below us. "I wanted to thank you," he said finally, "for being here despite everything, for not letting our parents' mistakes come between us." "It hasn't been easy," I admitted. "But I realized punishing you for their behavior would only create more regrets." Trevor stopped walking, turning to face me directly. "I've been thinking a lot about equity these past months, about privilege and advantage. I benefited from their favoritism my entire life, often without even realizing it." "You didn't ask for that advantage," I pointed out. "No, but I accepted it without question," he countered. "And now I have the opportunity to correct some of that imbalance." He handed me an envelope. Inside was a bank statement showing a new account in my name with a balance of $70,000, almost exactly the amount of my remaining student loans. "Trevor, I can't accept this," I started, but he held up his hand. "It's not a gift, Mel. It's restitution. That money should have been yours for education. Our parents diverted it to me without my knowledge, and I benefited from that diversion. I'm simply returning what should have been yours all along." Tears filled my eyes. "This is life-changing," I whispered, the weight of financial anxiety lifting slightly from my shoulders for the first time in years. "You deserve a clean slate," he said simply. "Use it for the loans, keep it for a house down payment, whatever you need. Just know that it comes with no strings or expectations." We hugged tightly there on the path, the first step in a healing journey between siblings raised in an unbalanced system. Trevor couldn't erase our parents' favoritism, but his acknowledgement and concrete action spoke volumes about his commitment to our relationship. The wedding ceremony itself was undeniably beautiful. White chairs lined the cliffside terrace, ocean breezes carried the scent of local flowers, and string musicians played as Sophia walked down the aisle, looking radiant in her custom gown. Standing beside her as maid of honor, I felt a complex mix of emotions: happiness for my brother's joy, lingering sadness about family truths, and cautious hope for healing. During the reception, I maintained polite distance from my parents, though I caught my mother watching me several times with an expression I couldn't quite interpret. Was it regret?
Confusion?
A dawning recognition of what their choices had cost us as a family? My father approached once, champagne in hand. "Your brother looks happy," he offered awkwardly. "He does," I agreed, keeping my response brief. "Melissa," he began hesitantly, "after we all return home, perhaps we could meet for lunch. There are things that should be discussed." It wasn't an apology, but it was an opening. "Maybe," I said noncommittally. "I'll need some time." The rest of the evening passed in a blur of toasts, dancing, and celebration. Ryan stayed close, his steady presence anchoring me through the emotional complexities. When we flew home 3 days later, I felt oddly lighter, as if confronting the painful truth had begun to free me from its power. Back in Portland, life resumed its normal rhythms. I paid off my student loans entirely with Trevor's restitution money, setting aside the remainder for future security. The freedom from that monthly payment transformed my financial situation, allowing small luxuries I denied myself for years. 3 months after the wedding, I finally agreed to meet my parents for lunch at a neutral restaurant. The conversation was difficult, halting, with moments of defensiveness from both sides. But for the first time, my father acknowledged that their financial decisions had indeed favored Trevor unfairly. We told ourselves we were being practical, he admitted reluctantly. But looking back, I can see how our choices communicated something harmful about our values and our love. Mom struggled more with acceptance, still justifying many of their decisions as doing what we thought was best. But she did express regret for the pain I'd experienced. "I never wanted you to feel less loved," she said, reaching hesitantly for my hand across the table. "But I did feel less loved," I replied honestly. And acknowledging that reality is the only path forward for us. Our relationship remained fragile, requiring careful rebuilding over the following year. I maintained firm boundaries about what behaviors I would and wouldn't accept. Some Sunday dinners resumed, though less frequently, and with new ground rules established. When they slipped into old patterns of excessive focus on Trevor's achievements, I calmly pointed it out rather than silently enduring. Trevor and Sophia made efforts to create more balanced family dynamics as well. They hosted gatherings where conversation topics were deliberately diverse, ensuring my work and accomplishments received equal attention. When they announced Sophia's pregnancy 6 months after the wedding, they were careful to include me in special moments rather than creating another sphere from which I felt excluded. The most meaningful change came unexpectedly. A year after the confrontation, my mother called to ask if she could visit my classroom. "I realize I've never really seen you teach," she explained. "I'd like to understand that part of your life better." Watching her observe my interactions with 23rd graders, seeing her expression shift from polite interest to genuine appreciation as she witnessed my skill and passion, felt like a small miracle. "You're remarkable with them," she said afterward, something like respect in her voice for perhaps the first time. That afternoon, one of my struggling students approached me with a drawing. "My parents don't think I'm as smart as my sister," he confided quietly. "They always help her with homework first." Looking into his worried eyes, I recognized the pain of perceived conditional love. Drawing from my own healing journey, I was able to help him articulate his feelings to his parents in constructive ways, facilitating a family conversation that might prevent the same pattern of favoritism from causing lifelong harm. Sometimes families develop habits without realizing how they affect everyone, I explained to him. But when we speak up with honesty and love, we give them the chance to change those habits. The ability to transform my painful experience into guidance that might help this child felt like the first true gift to emerge from the difficult year. Pain, when processed and understood, can become wisdom that serves others. My relationship with my parents will never be perfect. Some wounds go too deep for complete healing. But we've established a more honest foundation based on reality rather than pretense. They are learning to value me for who I am rather than measuring me against their expectations or my brother's choices. I am learning to set boundaries without building walls. Most importantly, I no longer measure my worth by their approval. The painful revelations force me to develop a stronger sense of self-validation, to recognize my value independent of external metrics like income or status. Teaching children remains my passion and purpose, regardless of how others perceive that choice. Trevor and I have developed a closer, more authentic relationship than we had before. The artificial harmony maintained by ignoring uncomfortable truths has been replaced by genuine connection based on honesty and mutual respect. He remains my brother, my friend, and now my ally in creating healthier family patterns. As I reflect on this journey, I realize that sometimes the most painful revelations become doorways to greater authenticity. Hearing those devastating words from my parents, "We'll make her pay for everything," ultimately freed me from illusions that had limited my self-perception for decades. Have you ever discovered painful truths about your family dynamics? How did you handle establishing new boundaries while maintaining relationships? Share your experiences in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please like and subscribe to support more content about family healing and personal growth. Remember, recognizing your worth isn't selfish. It's the foundation of healthy relationships and the beginning of true healing. Thank you for joining me on this journey, and I wish you strength and clarity on your own path to authentic family connections.